Okay. Hello. Hi, Laurence.
Hi, how you going, Baxter?
Good. Thank you for joining me here today, of course, remotely. So it's my morning and your evening. So I
That's
appreciate
right.
you taking the time on your Friday evening to talk to us today. So for anyone watching the video or listening in, my name is Baxter Willis from WM Reply. We do sort of modern workplace stuff. Hopefully you know us if you're watching this video. And I'm joined today by Dr. Laurence Lock Lee from Swoop. How are you holding up, Laurence?
Oh, well, I'm just like you when I'm at home. Swoop actually has always been a work from home organisation. So in some ways, it's not too different to normal. Although having said that, my daughter and son-in-law and grandson sort of moved in for the last month because they had a little flat in Sydney and they were having trouble working from home. So I've had my own live Zoom bomber come in every now and again. So, but thankfully he's just gone to bed, so we should be okay. So,
Okay, all important calls have to wait until
yeah.
nap time. Yeah, okay. I'm wondering now, are we in the largest ever experiment there ever was and probably ever will be for remote working and social interaction? And is this your dream that you've been, in many ways, you couldn't ask for a better experiment?
Exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. I actually wrote a blog post on this and saying, look, we're all in doom and gloom, but for some of us, this is the greatest moment in our professional opportunity in our professional careers. I mean, I think if you were a researcher only a couple of months ago studying, virtual work or virtual teams, you couldn't have dreamed that you could run a controlled experiment where everybody was asked to work from home for a couple of months at least, and if not 3 months, so this is hopefully it's a once in a generation opportunity to really understand how people work virtually at scale, and that's the way we're treating it. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Is there any event in history, even on a smaller scale, that we could liken to today?
Yeah, well, I think technology always disrupts, and when it actually disrupts, it disrupts rapidly. Sometimes you see it's a slow burn for a while, and then something, as I said, comes from left field. In my lifetime, I mean, you can always talk about the printing press and the telephone and things like that, but as I said, in my working lifetime, I've worked on a few things, in a research area with committees and what have you. I can remember working on graphic standards in the 1980s, probably. Just in the beginning of the graphical user interfaces, and we're all marching along this, trying to come up with a standard for how we'd represent, circles and boxes on screens, and then all of a sudden Mac Paint comes out and everybody doesn't worry about the standards anymore. They just want to buy a Mac and start drawing and things like that. I saw the fax machines come in, like faxes, they disrupted a lot of things, and then they disappeared nearly as fast. I think the IBM PC was one of the biggest changes in my experience, in terms of how people worked. So before that, computers were, locked away in the big room, and I was actually working with some of those big computers. But at the time when the PC came in and IBM legitimized that by being IBM, I was an IT manager working in that research lab, and one of the things we decided to do was give the executive what was called a portable computer, a portable PC. Now, this portable was like, your grandmother's sewing singing machine that you used to lug around. They were really luggables, but they all sort of were, they're all sort of very well educated, their PhDs and what have you, and they're all quite happy to type one fig into their research papers and so forth. So they're fully in control. They weren't really like the people that like to dictate, their letters or anything like that. They're quite happy to type. But I remember one of the executives, I came in, was watching him what he was doing, and he was, laboriously typing away his research paper. He'd get a page up, and then he'd print the page, and then he'd put that aside, and then he'd start working on the next page, and then he'd print it again. I'm saying, what are you doing, Arthur? You sort of, why are you printing it every time you've done a page? Well, don't you have to do that? He said, no, you just keep typing, and it'll worry about where the page breaks are. Sort of like. So I mean, some of these, you watch some of these things, and they're humorous now, but I think we'll probably look back at what we're doing today, and our sort of children and grandchildren will be saying, well, I remember what Granddad used to do. Oh God, yeah, did he work like that? So I think there'll always technology change, and when it hits you, it'll hit fast. I mean, and there'll be, of course, a lot of slow burns that don't go anywhere. But when things hit, they hit pretty quickly. So yeah, I think that was a big thing in my time. And of course, the internet was pretty quick as well. I mean, it was a slow burn up to the point when it became public, and then it just went wild. So yeah, I think we'll continue to see that. That happen.
It reminds me of, I can't remember the name of the book now, but talking about kind of big problems that we face today, and global warming being one of them, and tells the story of century Paris, where they were using horses, donkeys, and other animals to transport everything, and the manure and the dead bodies and the stench were just building up to a point they were clogging up areas of Paris, and they were having these big summits and trying all sorts of different things to try and discourage people from using horses and donkeys to move stuff around, or trying to clear out streets, and using different methods. And meanwhile, the automobile was being invented, and actually that left-based solution coming out of nowhere, which I guess the next question is really tough, because it's, what's your hypothesis? So whether you can guess to that left-based piece coming through, or if you were forced to kind of think about the big differences we'll see as a result of this. I'm guessing, in this scenario, I'm saying we have a vaccine, but by this time next year, and we're back at work. But does it look the same, or what do you think the big things companies will learn or change might look like?
Yeah, well, it's that's a good question. I guess a lot of people are speculating about that at the moment. Sort of there's a lot of consensus around that we're not going to go back to what it was. People aren't just going to all rush back to the office. And I think the reason for that is that the people that stay in the corporate office tend to be the line management, the senior management in organizations. Those senior management now have been working from home, and it's been a bit of I think it's those sort of line managers that are used to being in the office and in control in the office that are experiencing the biggest disruptions, because they're now, it really is leveling the field, if you like. So when you're talking to each other in your kitchens or what have you, you're all the same, right? Maybe his kitchen's a little bit fancier than yours, but it's not the same as in the office, so I think that's going to change it a lot. And I think the other thing that, in terms of working from home policies, I think I read somewhere about 2 or 3 years ago that 60% of companies had a working from home policy. I'd imagine now there's 100% of companies have that policy in place now. And so I think that having experienced this style of work, I don't think everybody's going to rush back to the office. I think some people will enjoy getting back to the office, but some people will say, well, look, that was 2 hours out of my day going into the office and back out that I'll never get back again, so and certainly when we've done talks in our benchmarking report, and we've run little mini surveys about what people feel is different about working from home, the number one thing that comes up is flexibility. The fact that their work life is so much more flexible now, and I don't think people will willingly give that up and necessarily rush back to the office. So I think there is a bit of a consensus that it's going to be a bit more of a halfway house than it was before. And I think also the fact that the senior management who had always gone into the office, having worked from home, they will probably see some things that are different too. And they're probably suffering more of a challenge in trying to sort of manage how they may have managed in the office, now trying to do something similar, at home with a virtual team. They'll find it much more difficult. So I think there's been quite a leveling, if you like, of the playing field in terms of the structure, and it's been pretty much enforced by this virtual work.
And what evidence do we have, or on anything you've read or come across or worked on yourself, around the connection between remote working, and I don't just mean working from home, I mean getting stuff done online, to the traditional employee engagement metrics, like I would recommend this place to my friend, but also productivity? Is there evidence? I mean, you can if you venture into Google, you can find a study that supports any of those arguments that you want to, can't you?
Of course, yeah. Well, that's a continual question about, you know, is our productivity actually going to be better as a remote working group, or are we going to suffer? You know, what, and that's been asked for decades. In fact, interesting enough, I had this book here. It's called Virtual Teams, right?
Okay.
So this is a very topical book, isn't it? You know, this is something that the world is looking for now, a book on how to do virtual teams. I picked that up off my bookshelf a few days ago, and I started flicking through it, and I recognized that the book was written 23 years ago, right? So I thought, well, this is crazy. And I said, I was starting reading it again, and I thought, this book could have been written yesterday and it would have been relevant. The only thing that was dating it was the companies that she mentioned. Was a husband and wife author, actually, Jessica Lipnack and Jeffrey Stamps. And I actually tweeted it. I took a picture of it and put it out on Twitter, and I said that. I pretty much said this book could have been written yesterday. It was actually published in 1997. And of course, Twitter, as Twitter is, it gets back to her, and she sort of pings me and says, you know, and then we start chatting, and then I said, well, look, you know, we're running our own Swoop Live series. You know, we'd love to interview you, like you're interviewing Baxter, you're interviewing me. I said, I'm sure you've got some stories to tell, because you wrote this book, you know, like 2 or 3 years after the internet started, you know, sort of, and here it is 23 years later, and it's still very topical. And she told me a number of things, you know, as well as this sort of, she said, well, you know, like when we wrote the book, you know, there was only like about 5% of the world online, you know, so now I think she said 60% of the world's population is online, and in the US that's 90%. And she said that, you know, like today, the people that were born when her book was published are well and truly in the workforce now. So the online collaborating natives are actually well and truly in the workforce now. So you know, this is going to change the world quite a lot, I think. And the other interesting thing other notion she had was that she talked about ZJs. And I said, well, what are ZJs? And she said, well, you know what a DJ does? A DJ orchestrates the music, you know, in a show and what have you. Well, a ZJ actually orchestrates a Zoom meeting. You know, so if you've been in a Zoom meeting with, you know, 10, 15 faces, you know how awkward it is, and it's hard to actually have a proper meeting, if you like, when you've got that many. So you need somebody to actually orchestrate the conversation online in something like Zoom. And she started to refer these as ZJs. And she was suggesting that, you know, this is a skill that managers are going to have to learn. You know, I think she's right. I think that the managers that are used to sort of being physically co-located with their staff, being able to walk around and sort of see what's going on and correct and control things, you know, at home, that's a different dynamic, you know, and they do become more like the servant leader and so forth, which I know we've heard a lot about before, but now it's sort of becoming a reality. And one of those skills is how to facilitate your workers rather than, if you like, manage or control them. And so it was rhetoric before now, but now it's reality. I mean, you don't have another choice. You know, this is the way they have to work.